Have you ever stopped to think what it would be like to build the Tower of Babel in our days with all the modern technology we have? The answer will leave you speechless, because it's nothing like what you would imagine. We are talking about one of the most ambitious and arrogant projects ever attempted by humanity, a construction so absurd that God himself had to intervene to prevent it from being completed. And before you think this is just another ancient story with no connection to our lives, hold that thought, because what is going to happen in the next few minutes will change the way you see human ambition, the limits of engineering, and even God's own purpose for diversity among peoples. Don't leave now. But before diving into this entire story, I need to ask you a question that may seem strange at first. If you had unlimited resources and all the technology in the world available, how far would you try to go? To the clouds? To space? To reach heaven itself? Most people, when imagining this possibility, dream big but recognize that there is a physical limit to everything. But the builders of the Tower of Babel didn't think that way. They literally wanted to reach the heavens and make a name for themselves that would last forever. And this unrestrained ambition, my friend, will be at the center of everything you're about to hear from this point forward. Stay with me. This happened around the year 2200 BC, just a few centuries after Noah's flood, when all humanity still spoke a single language and lived united on the plain of Shinar, a region we know today as Iraq. The Bible tells us in the book of Genesis chapter 11 that the people said, "Let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top reaches the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves." It was at that moment that history changed forever. Imagine yourself living in a time without cranes, without reinforced concrete, with nothing more than mud bricks and bitumen, and still deciding to build something that would reach impossible heights. Most people would laugh at that idea. But those people went beyond all of that and began a construction that still surprises us today. Don't lose focus now. And do you know what is most impressive about this whole story? The Tower of Babel was not interrupted because it was technically impossible to build. It was interrupted because God saw that if those people remained united with a single language, nothing they intended to do would be impossible for them. Genesis 11:6 records God's own words, acknowledging the unlimited potential of a unified humanity. This is not a story about human incapacity. This is a story about unrestrained ambition that needed to be contained. And the way God intervened, confusing the languages and scattering the peoples across the earth, permanently changed the course of human civilization. This is not theological exaggeration. This is a historical event that explains the origin of the different languages and nations that still exist today. This does not happen by chance. But here is a myth that many people believe and that needs to be broken right now. Many people think the Tower of Babel was small, like a modest structure that barely rose off the ground. That is completely untrue. Archaeological evidence of ziggurats in Mesopotamia, pyramidal structures similar to what the tower likely was, shows constructions ranging from 60 to 90 meters in height, and those were only the ones that were completed. The ambition of the Tower of Babel was far greater. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century AD, mentions that the tower was so tall it took an entire year to climb from the ground to the top. Even if exaggerated, this shows that the historical memory of this project was of something truly colossal. And this part of the story is something almost no one properly grasps. But you will understand better from here on. And speaking of dimensions and ambition, this part deserves to be explored more deeply because it directly connects to the question of building the same tower today. If we used modern technology and truly wanted to reach the heavens, as the original intention stated, we would be talking about building something that reaches at least into space, which officially begins at 100 kilometers of altitude at the Kármán line. 100 kilometers high. To give you a sense of scale, the tallest building in the world today, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, stands at 828 meters. That means we would need to build something 120 times taller than the tallest structure humanity has ever built. This is not just ambitious. It enters a realm of engineering that has never been attempted before. Now let's talk about how much it would cost to build this modern tower reaching into space, and the numbers will genuinely surprise you. Engineers who speculate about mega structures estimate that a 100-kilometer-high tower would require an absurdly wide base to support its weight, something between 10 and 20 kilometers in diameter. The amount of construction material would be incomprehensible. Just in concrete and steel alone, we would be talking about billions upon billions of tons. The estimated cost, between $5 and $10 trillion. That is more than the GDP of entire countries, more than was spent on all world wars combined, more than humanity has spent on all space exploration to date. The scale would be absurd, and what's most impressive is imagining that the people of the original Tower of Babel attempted something proportionally similar with infinitely inferior technology. And for this reason, before going into technical construction details, it's worth stopping for a second to absorb what this project means in terms of time. Building the Burj Khalifa took 6 years with thousands of workers and all modern technology. A tower 120 times taller, even with full automation and robotics, would take at least 50 to 100 years of continuous construction. 100 years. That is longer than the current human life expectancy. No one who started the project would see it completed. It would be a generational endeavor, requiring continuity of vision, resources, and technology for decades upon decades. And here lies the irony. The original people of the Tower of Babel had exactly that, a unified vision that crossed generations because everyone spoke the same language and shared the same goal. And here comes the moment you've been waiting for since the beginning of this entire story. Let's place the original Tower of Babel side by side with a modern version built without divine intervention and see what happens. The original tower probably stood between 60 and 100 meters when it was interrupted. A modern version that truly reached space would stand at 100,000 meters. That is 1,000 times taller. The difference in scale is so vast that it's almost impossible to visualize. But the purpose would be exactly the same, to make a name for humanity, to demonstrate power and self-sufficiency, to reach the divine through human effort. Technology changes, but the arrogance of the human heart remains identical. Don't leave now. And speaking of this comparison, it's impossible not to reflect on what this represents when we look at our reality today. We have skyscrapers hundreds of meters tall, impressive structures all over the planet, and even a space station orbiting Earth. And each of these achievements comes with the same mindset that motivated Babel. Look what we have accomplished. Look how far we've come. Engineering has advanced exponentially, but the fundamental motivation behind many projects remains the same as that of the people of Shinar. To make a name, to achieve glory, to prove we don't need God. This is a mirror we need to look into far more carefully than we look at our modern buildings, because designing a 100-kilometer tower is technically possible with modern engineering, but executing it is a completely different matter. The challenges are astronomical. The structure would need to withstand winds reaching 500 kilometers h at higher altitudes. It would have to endure temperature variations of 60 degrees Celsius in the upper layers. It would need to handle decreasing atmospheric pressure and gravity as it rises. Elevator systems would have to function across distances never before attempted. And all of this assumes that humanity could remain united toward a single objective for decades, without conflict, without wars, without interruptions, something that, as history shows, is practically impossible without divine intervention keeping everyone united in the same language and purpose. And speaking of unity and shared purpose, this is one of the most fascinating parts of the entire story and deserves full exploration, because many people don't understand why God intervened. The problem wasn't the tower itself, it was what it represented. It was humanity uniting not to glorify God, but to glorify itself. It was the desire to reach the heavens by one's own merit, rather than depending on divine provision. It was the refusal to spread across the earth as God had commanded after the flood. Genesis 9:1 records God saying to Noah and his sons, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth." But instead of obeying, the people concentrated in one place, trying to build something that would keep them together and famous. Disobedience was at the heart of the project from the very beginning. What makes this event so powerful is that God did not destroy the tower the way he destroyed the world with the flood. He simply confused the languages. A surgical, precise intervention that made continuation of the project impossible without killing anyone, without physically destroying anything. Suddenly, engineers could no longer understand architects. Workers could no longer comprehend supervisors. The chaos of communication made coordination impossible. And naturally, gradually, the project was abandoned, and people grouped by language and spread across the earth exactly as God had originally commanded. The divine intervention was so ingenious that it turned their very tool of unity, language, into the cause of their separation. But here is another myth that circulates widely and needs to be broken as well. Many people think the confusion of languages at Babel was something negative, a cruel punishment that unnecessarily divided humanity. That is completely false. The diversity of languages and cultures that resulted from Babel is actually a divine protection. It prevents all humanity from uniting under a single evil purpose, as could happen if everyone spoke the same language. It creates natural barriers against global tyranny, against totalitarian systems that would dominate the entire planet if linguistic and cultural divisions did not exist. And in God's final plan, all this diversity will be redeemed. Revelation 7:9 describes an uncountable multitude from every nation, tribe, people and language worshipping God together. The diversity created at Babel will remain in eternity, but now united in the correct purpose, glorifying God instead of glorifying man. And that is precisely why the story of Babel impacts us so deeply even today. Not because it was an unfinished tower, but because it was a clear demonstration that God establishes limits on human ambition when that ambition turns against him. You can have all the technology in the world, all the money on the planet, all possible coordination, but if your ultimate goal is to exalt man instead of exalting God, you will encounter a barrier that no engineering can overcome. And this confronts us with a deeply uncomfortable reality. No matter how high we build, no matter how far we go, we will never reach God by our own efforts. The path to him is not vertical through towers, it is horizontal through the cross of Christ. And this leads us to a very important reflection about our own lives today. We live in an age where technology makes us feel invincible. We have artificial intelligence, genetic editing, the ability to manipulate matter at the atomic level. And with each advancement, the temptation grows to believe we no longer need God, that we can solve everything on our own, that humanity is self-sufficient. But technological capability is something completely different from spiritual wisdom. You can build all the way into space and still be infinitely far from God if your heart is pointed in the wrong direction. This is exactly what Babel teaches us, even after more than 4,000 years. Technology has changed everything around us, but the nature of the human heart remains the same, and the need for humility before God remains absolutely unchanged. So, considering everything we've talked about so far, here is the question that will echo in your mind for days. If we built a modern Tower of Babel today, 100 kilometers high, spending trillions of dollars and decades of work, what would it ultimately prove? That we are intelligent? That we are capable? That we don't need God? The answer is simpler than it seems, yet deeper than anything you've heard before. Reaching the heavens physically does not bring you even 1 millimeter closer to God spiritually. The people of Babel learned this the hard way. We can learn it through wisdom instead of repeating their mistake. And that is exactly why this entire story matters so much to our lives today. It is not just an account of ancient construction preserved in history books. It is a direct warning for our present reality. You build your career as if it were a tower meant to elevate you above everyone else. You accumulate achievements like floors meant to bring you closer to fulfillment. You seek to make a name for yourself, as if that would give eternal meaning to your existence. And in the end, when you reach the top of everything you built with so much effort, you discover that you are still empty, still distant from what truly matters, that you built the wrong tower in the wrong direction. You will think twice about what you are building in your life after hearing this, or at least you should. And you know what is most surprising about all of this? The right path has not changed at all from the time of Babel until today. What God always wanted was not for us to build our way up to Him, but to recognize that He came down to us. The Tower of Babel tried to reach heaven from the ground up through human effort, but God, in the person of Jesus Christ, came down from heaven to us, crossed the distance we could never cross, and built the true bridge between humanity and divinity. Not through bricks and bitumen, not through technology and engineering, but through the cross and the resurrection. This is the only tower that truly reaches heaven, and it was completed 2,000 years ago. And before concluding this entire journey, there is one final detail that must be said about the Tower of Babel and its meaning for us today. Those ancient builders wanted to make a name for themselves, but God promised Abraham, just a few chapters later in Genesis, that He would make him into a great nation, and that his name would be great. The difference? One group tried to make a name through self-effort and rebellion. Abraham received a great name through obedience and faith. You can spend your entire life building towers to make your own name, or you can surrender your life to God and let Him make you into something far greater than you could ever achieve on your own. The choice is yours, but the consequences are eternal. So if you stayed until the very end of this entire story, first of all, you deserve a heartfelt thank you, because most people don't have this patience or ability to stay until the end. You were different, and that already places you in a very special position. Now, if this story changed the way you see ambition, construction, and the true path to God, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Send it to a friend, a family member. Send it to anyone who will benefit from it. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, Subscribe now, because there is much more content like this coming. The Tower of Babel was left unfinished more than 4,000 years ago, but the bridge Christ built on the cross is complete and available now. And this decision of yours to subscribe and continue seeking the truth can change not only your life, but determine which tower you will spend eternity with, the one you try to build on your own, or the one God has already completed for you.